Huh. It's been half a year since the last time we covered comics on this channel? I guess unless you count the manga about the lesbian Kamen Riders, which I hope you've all gone on to read since then because there's going to be a test. As far as American comics go, though, I think our last discussion was in my 10 Awesome Things from 2023 video. And since I'm sitting here typing the script out only a few days out from recording with no ideas of what I'm actually going to make a video on, I guess we'll dive into the idea vault.
Kill the Tsar? Now that's an old one.
The comics that we're going to discuss today are ones that I've actually wanted to do a deeper dive on for a while, and maybe I will the next time the content well starts looking a little dry. But for now, I'm going to put on my shady car dealer hat and try to sell you on some funny books. Then again, considering we're going to be talking about horror comics specifically, maybe funny book isn't really the right term. That said, before I try putting the fear into you, let me start by assuaging the fears of the non-comic book readers in the audience whose understanding of the medium is that comics are some never-ending stream of content that's impossible to get into, by saying that the comics we're going to be discussing today are all series that are completely finished and available to pick up in trade paperback form, the longest of them coming in at a tidy 3 volumes. All of them should be pretty easy to find either online or at your local comic book shop, and with that said, please try to support your local comic book shop first. I've said it before in another video, but the margins are razor thin and they're out there doing it for the love of the game. Now, have I ever mentioned how much I love horror? Because man do I love horror as a genre. And though there are some great horror comics out there, I do sometimes feel that it's a genre that's vastly underserved in the medium of comics. Which is kinda sad considering how perfect of a medium comics are for conveying visuals full of dread, uneasiness, and all-out revulsion. It's a statement that Junji Ito would become world famous for proving. So, to that end, let me take you by the hand and introduce you to a few worlds of illustrated horror that you might not have heard of. Starting with... Anthologies might just be my favorite form of horror. While there's really nothing out there to draw you in like a good full-length story with clearly developed personalities and time for the plot to marinate, sometimes you just want a shorter, snackier campfire story to give you all that good junk food thrill. It's a point I made in my video on creepypasta, and it's one I still stand by. After all, the aforementioned Junji Ito's success is largely due to his collected volumes of one-shots, which are oftentimes the ones that really manage to get under people's skin and stick with them. And while I certainly won't make the claim that you're going to find an enigma of Amigara fault within the pages of Creepshow, what you are going to find is a number of tight, snacky horror stories from a wide variety of authors and artists, including the one-shot Wolverton Station, which was penned by Joe Hill, a man both known for writing The Black Phone and for being shot out of Stephen King's penis. Too lowbrow? Sorry, Joe, I write my scripts right after waking up, and the sleep-deprived me of right now thought that line was hilarious. Speaking of the King family, though, the name Creepshow might sound familiar to the horror lovers in my audience because the comic takes its name and concept from the 1982 film of the same name, written by Stephen King, who also played the lead character Jordy Verrill in a Southern Fried take on The Color Out of Space.
Meteor ship!
The film itself was inspired by the EC horror comics of yesteryear, like Tales from the Crypt, whose influence could be felt all throughout. As a side note, I'm 99% sure this movie is responsible for my fear of cockroaches, a fear it took over 20 years and a cartoon Slavic woman on the internet to get past. Anyway, many, including myself, absolutely love this film for its creative horror, striking visuals, and dedication to capturing the feel of those classic comics. It's why in 2019, streaming service Shudder made a new series under the revived Creepshow name in order to carry on its legacy, with new seasons of one-off horror in that same delicious pulpy vein. I mean, the very first episode is an adaptation of a story from one of King's best collections and has Giancarlo Esposito and Tobin motherfucking Bell in it. The show is great, but as great as the show is, it's even cooler in my opinion that the new wave of appreciation for Creepshow led to Image Comics turning it into a full-on limited-run comic series, thus bringing the franchise full circle back to the medium that inspired the original film. On that note, fans of talkative horror hosts like the Crypt Keeper, who were disappointed by the Creep's silent presence within his own film debut, will be happy to know that he plays his role in the comics in a manner much more in line with the hosts that came before him, introducing each tale with a short blurb that sets the mood, and ending them with his own morbid humor and ruminations on the characters we just read about. What I'm getting at is that these stories are fun. And as I've said a million times now, horror is fun. It isn't always, sometimes it's soul-crushingly depressing if that's what gets you off, but if you're like me and have already been beaten down enough by the horrors of the real world, then it's a lot more fun to read a story about a giant undead monster who kills and mutilates people who don't return their shopping carts to the cart corral. A fate that's frankly well-deserved. Put your carts up, you animals. Now, being an anthology series, the obvious downside is that not every story is going to be a hit. But there's such a wide variety of art styles and horror subgenres on display that every story is worth reading through at least once. It's fun as all get out, and it really does feel like it perfectly captures the spirit of those classic horror comics that it sets out to pay tribute to. The series right now consists of 2 paperback collections consisting of 5 issues each, and the aforementioned Wolverton Station special, which I don't believe is included in either collection, so if you enjoy these and want to read more, hop on down to your local comic book shop and I am sure they'll help you get your claws on it. So take this as my recommendation to go read Creepshow and then come back here and tell me what your favorite story was. I think for me it has to be either Killer Cart Corral or The Amulet, both of which are from the same issue in Volume 2, Issue 4. It was just super solid in both writing and art all around. For our second recommendation, let's go from an anthology series to a self-contained story. As I mentioned in my video on Ginger Clown, both the best movie ever made and the best of the 2 movies to ever feature Tim Curry as an evil clown monster, I love the aesthetic of evil/haunted theme parks. I'm not sure what it is, but there's just something about the fairy tale world that theme parks create that when shown in a spookier light manages to hit me right in the cockles of my heart. Hey, it's not a dirty word. MatPat said it.
Thank you for that. That warms my heart. It warms the cockles. My cockles have been warmed.
Please don't say it like that.
So imagine how warmed my cockles felt when I was perusing the shelves at my local comic shop and this cover caught my eye. The name Dark Ride, for those who don't really give a shit about theme parks, refers to a style of theme park ride that consists of getting into a vehicle and being taken on a tour of a set or a series of sets. Think things like the Haunted Mansion at Disney World or the Cursed Wiggles ride from Dreamworld. So, to see a title that immediately brought theme parks to mind and featured this deliciously early 2000s goth girl on the cover, yeah, no, this was an instant purchase. And man, you know how sometimes you see a piece of media that feels like it was almost perfectly crafted for you specifically? That's what it was like for me reading Dark Ride. One of the things that always disappoints me about a lot of theme park horror, like Escape from Tomorrow, is that they tend to come from a place of animosity towards the very concept. I'm no friend of capitalism myself, and believe me when I say I get why people have their issues with theme parks, but I also enjoy Disneyland and Disney World on an almost completely unironic level. Actually, I don't know why I said almost, a completely unironic level. It's fun to just completely lose yourself in a facade of a fictional world. To pretend that for a little while, yes, you really did fly through space with the Guardians of the Galaxy to the tune of that one song from Futurama that Human Bender debauches his way through before dying of a heart attack. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because it is apparent when reading Dark Ride that it could have only been created by somebody who not only understands but appreciates the worlds of theme parks and why people love them, something the author even mentions in their letters column. Dark Ride is the story of the Dante family, the patriarch of which, Arthur, was responsible for creating the world's greatest horror theme park, Devilland, home of Danny D. Evil. Devilland is the most gruesome and evil place on Earth, but it's all just for show, right? Well, before the end of the series, we'll learn the answer to that question right alongside our protagonists, including the sister of an employee who went missing in the park, and Arthur's own estranged children, each of which have their own mixed feelings towards the park and its legacy. Dark Ride is honestly one of the coolest comics I have read in recent years, and part of what makes it such an engaging read is the sheer amount of thought that went into the creation of Devilland. Arthur Dante's nightmare world is as much of a character as any of the humans are in the story, and each of these rides sounds like exactly the kind of thing I would kill to be able to ride in real life. One of my favorite little touches in the series is this map of Devilland from the end of the first issue that lists all of the attractions with a little blurb about what each ride entails. I cannot express enough the things I would do to be able to ride the Tunnel of Lovecraft. Just maybe not the kind of things Arthur Dante did to get the chance to create it. Coming in at a total of 12 issues, collected over 3 volumes, Dark Ride is the longest story we're going to be recommending today, but believe me when I say that it is the coolest thing in the world if it hits for you in the same way that it did for me. A genuinely awesome and unique concept carried by excellent writing from Joshua Williamson and gorgeous artwork from Andre Bresson, who I was ecstatic to see now working on the Destro series for Skybound's Energon universe. Downright is a concept unlike anything I've ever read in comics so far, and I cannot recommend enough that you buy your ticket now. Just make sure before you leave home to pack your bags, lock your doors, and sign your last will. The final story we're going to talk about today is one that I actually might have completely glossed over if it wasn't for a recommendation from my good friend Android Usagi, who is more or less the sommelier for our local comic book shop, and who guided me in the direction of this one when the first issue had just dropped. Set in 1994-era Scotland and written by John Lees, The Nasty is the tale of a group of horror movie enthusiasts who call themselves the Murder Club, and whose favorite pastime is meeting up in the back of their local horror movie shop and viewing video nasties. Now, a quick lesson for those unacquainted that I am going to rip shamelessly from Wikipedia because I trust them to explain it better than I ever could. Video nasty is a colloquial term popularized by the National Viewers and Listeners Association in the United Kingdom to refer to a number of films, typically low-budget horror or exploitation films, distributed on videocassette that were criticized for their violent content by the press, social commentators, and various religious organizations in the early 1980s. These videocassettes were not brought before the British Board of Film Classification due to a loophole in film classification laws that allowed videos to bypass the review process. The resulting uncensored video releases led to public debate concerning the availability of these films to children due to the unregulated nature of the market. So basically horror movies that could get you in genuine legal trouble for owning because they were too extreme by the standards of the kinds of people who wouldn't watch horror movies if you offered them $1 million and a free trip to Devilland. And while you can debate up and down about whether or not these movies really did go too far, and personally I'm in the camp of at least Cannibal Holocaust crossing the line by including the torture of real animals, I think we can all agree that censorship is never the correct answer. A sentiment that I'm sure the Murder Club would agree with me on, because they love video nasties. Not in some edgelord, oh, we're so cool for this kind of way, but instead because they understand that horror movies are fun. It's fun to be scared, and it's fun to be scared with friends. It's why horror movies are always more fun to visit when you've got a group of friends to go with. And the story of our Murder Club kicks off in earnest when they get their hands on the most infamous video nasty of them all. The House of Creeping Flesh! A film that's infamous in the world of our story for being impossible to find and the kind of thing creepypastas are written about. A lost, heinous film that supposedly causes misfortune to anybody who watches it. So, of course, when our Murder Club gets their hands on a copy, they all decide that naturally they're going to invite the, quote, biggest annual event on the British horror calendar to their small town with the promise of a screening. Unfortunately for our gang, things go south when they try to actually watch The House of Creeping Flesh, as their VCR eats the tape only a few minutes in. Making things worse is the fact that they've already been accepted to host the aforementioned Halloween Horror Fest, so they'd better think of something quick. That is when our main character Thumper has an idea. If the film is so rare that nobody even knows the plot, what's to stop the Murder Club from creating their own House of Creeping Flesh and present it as the genuine article?
Ho, 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 ho. Delightfully devilish, Seymour.
Let me just say, I love everything about this plot. This is like a Stephen King story by way of Ed, Edd, and Eddy, and I mean that with all of the love I have in my heart. It is a story of a group of friends, all bonded over a mutual love and who put their passions into practice to create something special for their community, all while trying to cover their own asses. It is amazing. And, of course, some of you may find yourselves asking, okay, so it's a plot about horror, but is it really a horror story? To which I say 3 things. First, shut up, you're being pedantic. 2, go watch One Cut of the Dead. 3rd, I'm not done describing the story. You see, our boy Thumper has this imaginary friend. Maybe you've heard of him? His name is Red Ennis, star of the infamous Labor Day films. Yeah, when Thumper was a lonely little kid, he watched a Friday the 13th movie and decided that he needed to have Jason as a friend. It's honestly kind of endearing. The Red Ennis in Thumper's imagination is the kind of gentle giant who just wants to be a good friend to him. However, things begin to go south when the influence of the House of Creeping Flesh begins to influence the lives of those seeking to recreate it, and the Red Ennis in Thumper's head begins to show signs that he might not be staying imaginary for long. But hey, how cool would it be to film your own horror movie with a legit movie monster as an actor? Throughout the filming process, we watch the murder club gather people from all over their town of Rutherglen to help their movie come to life, and it's this incredibly heartwarming process to watch play out. A love letter to the independent filmmaker's spirit, and you can feel the passion each of the characters have for their art, even as internal frictions, supernatural influences, and horror-hating moral decency leagues threaten to tear it all apart at the seams. Coming in at a total of 8 issues, which you can nab in a single trade paperback, The Nasty is a series which I am happy to give a wholehearted recommendation. If you want your horror a little on the lighter side, or just preferred It Chapter 1 over Chapter 2, The Nasty is right up your alley. What a fucking strange series of words that was. So there you go, 3 different horror comics that you can and should hop on down to your local comic shop and check out. I am on record as saying that comics are a vastly underrated storytelling medium, and although the constant doom posting about how the medium is dying is inaccurate at the best of times, there's no denying that a lot of people who would enjoy the stories found in these comics have likely never even heard of them because this is a world that can look confusing and intimidating from the outside. So, please do yourself a favor and at least check out one of the comics I've recommended here today. And then when you're done, come back to the comments and let me know what you thought. And with all that said, this is where we shall once again part ways. But before you go, I would ask that you please hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and might I also recommend another video of mine to check out before you leave? Today I shall reach for recommendations into what I call my proto-pointless era, and recommend my video about Ginger Clown, the best and worst movie that you've probably never seen, and also features Tim Curry as a clown monster. And just remember that this has been a powerfully pointless video, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways. Unpleasant dreams.